So I'm Roz Lee. My pronouns are she and her. I grew up in New York City. I live in Harlem with my spouse Beverly and our kid Stella. I just am celebrating this year 37 years of activism. Worked on my first campaign when I was a 17-year-old first year college student. And I have always been an advocate for racial justice and gender justice. I identify as a lesbian and I identify as queer. So there's never been a separation of the justice and equity work. Um, your identities can't be pulled apart. I'm a big fan of the work of Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a theorist and scholar and activist, and is well known for intersectionality as a theory of change and solutions to problems and access to justice is definitely uh, you can't separate out your identities. And so for me, this time is a really, really exciting time where we're seeing all kinds of folks come together in pursuit of justice and equality. We have some springboards around addressing police brutality, defending Black lives, defunding the police so that those resources can be used to make communities stronger, to increase economic justice, racial justice, gender justice, and LGBTQ justice. And so the extraordinary moment that we're in is that these movements are led by queer folks who have always been doing this kind of organizing. Beverly and I come out of movement work, and we are in this movement. So we celebrate our queer pride today, while we are also celebrating this amazing time of Black uprising and a movement for Black liberation.
I will echo the excitement. I'm Beverly Tillery. I work as the executive director of the New York City Anti-Violence Project, and have been waiting for this moment or something like it for a long time. And for me, part of what is exciting about this moment is that, I think for years we were taught in social justice movements, and I think we believed that we had to work on all of these issues in a piecemeal way, one at a time. Or even if we were working on them at the same time, we had to work on them separately. And I think we're seeing that people are rejecting that. One, because it didn't work, right? The divide and conquer mentality that you have to choose which thing you're going to talk about first. And we've seen that in the queer movement for many years. I have been involved in a bunch of different ways, but seeing how we've parsed out, we're going to go for this thing, and we're going to, we're going to ask trans folks to wait, or we're going to, ask, queer people of color to wait. And people are saying no, no one has to wait. We can all move forward together. And when we are focusing on and prioritizing the people and the communities that are most impacted by the issues that we're all facing, that we recognize that we will all do better. And I think that we're really seeing that happen for the first time for me in such a large, widespread way across the country. And that is really powerful. And, at the Anti-Violence Project, we try in our work to really center and prioritize the people who are most impacted by violence. So that has been, trans women of color, Black trans women for years. And to see how these protests, at least in New York City, looking at supporting Black lives have very quickly morphed to be inclusive of Black trans women. It is just amazing. And now we have to continue to do the work to make sure that we actually implement the changes that we need to see. But it's an exciting moment to be in the city, to be in this country, to be doing this work.
So, Paul, I realized that I didn't fully answer your question when you asked me to say my name and what I do. And so I want to add, add that to the conversation. And so I identify as Black, I identify as a lesbian, and I am also a feminist. My day job is working at the Ms. Foundation for Women, which is one of the first and largest feminist funds in the country. And so being able to do that work and bring a Black queer feminist lens, a Black lesbian feminist lens to my work as well as my activism is a tremendous honor and a privilege. And I'm following in the footsteps of many Black lesbian feminists that came before me. I really want to echo what Bev said about the extraordinary moment and why it's exciting. It's about power building in this country, and we're watching it happen in the midst of a global pandemic, a diversified response to the violence and brutality by police against Black communities in the US, Black people in the US. And we are also seeing a wave of support for LGBTQ communities. It is not something that we could have imagined to have protests after the murder of George Floyd, to have protests across this country on a Sunday that were focused on Black trans lives. When I first started doing this organizing work, I couldn't have imagined that we could have included all of our identities in fighting for racial justice. And to know that all across this country, multiple states held protests and rallies and marches centering Black trans lives really brings me tremendous hope. I'm so inspired to do even more on a daily basis than I had already been doing, just by seeing that kind of stepping forward and standing up for those who have been pushed most to the margins in our queer community.
I'm learning. Obviously, I know about the coalition, know that you all have existed and been watching to see kind of how you all are moving in this space and what you are doing. But I don't feel like I am completely in the know about the Reclaim Pride Coalition. In looking at the ideals and the things that the coalition has been standing for, those are definitely ideals that I agree with and relate to, but have not been as engaged. So yeah, I would love to hear more about sort of where you all are and where you feel like you're going.
I would say I am also learning, but I definitely am not completely new to knowing about Reclaim Pride. I first learned about it actually from a longtime activist, Leslie Kagan, who sent me information about what Reclaim Pride was trying to do. And then, of course, my former colleague and friend, Danny Maiori. So I'm really interested, and I'm really pleased to know that Reclaim Pride this year has also dedicated this march to Black liberation. Yeah, and what I do know also, Paul, is that, and this really came from folks who have been more active in Reclaim Pride in sharing information with me, is really the rejection of the corporatization of Pride and going back to the activist roots of the Pride March and the Pride Rally. And that is something, I think there's space for all of it, personally. because we're such a diverse community, and inclusion should be what it is. It doesn't have to be that everyone shares my views. But I do think, and so the tent should be as large as we can make it. But I do want to honor and support any effort to keep alive that we're fighting for and believe in something a lot broader than just the ability to show up at a march.
Yeah, Roz and I both, have organizing backgrounds. And in some ways, I think we still consider ourselves organizers. And so I have worked at prides for many, many years for organizations that I've worked for, and always have tried to make sure that when I'm showing up at Pride, it's really about bringing people together to take some action in some way. And, you know, we all know that, we've lost a lot of that over the years. And it's fine for people to celebrate too. I think that there's not enough joy and not enough celebration in our social justice work and movement. And so it's important for that to be the case. And Pride is a huge opportunity where we have not only thousands upon thousands, tens of thousands of queer folks coming together every year, but other folks who consider themselves allies, some who are just curious and thinking about how do we mobilize those communities in that moment, I think is really important. And, for me, and particularly for us at AVP, the other thing that's really important to us is to be looking at how do we honor and celebrate Pride in a way where we're not overly reliant on the police, because we know that the police do not make us safe. And in many ways, the police make us unsafe. And so the overuse and reliance on the police at Pride has been a concern for a while. And I think now people are starting to understand when we say we don't feel safe when you call the police, and what that really means. And we've seen it over and over again, but for whatever reason, this moment, I think people are understanding what that means, particularly for queer people of color, and that just the presence of police makes some people feel unsafe. And so how do we do this without relying on police? And also the over celebration of the police that often is on display at Pride.
Beverly and I had a chance to celebrate Juneteenth in our neighborhood here in Harlem last weekend. It was beautiful to see the different kinds of activities that happened across the city, but it was nice to be in our home base and celebrating a holiday that's really important to us. And in fact, it was so important that when we decided to get married, we did it the day before Juneteenth. And now that was 4 years ago, although our relationship is actually, a lot longer than that, closer to 19 years. And I talk about Juneteenth because it's a holiday that we knew a lot about, but not a lot of Americans, or not as many Americans, knew about. And what struck me in the national dialogue, because Juneteenth became such a part of the national conversation, that it was an opportunity for people to really understand the history of the enslavement of Black people in America, and that what that liberation or Emancipation Day, Freedom Day, was really about. And in a society that really where people got really comfortable separating or distancing themselves from that history or claiming to have no knowledge of that history. I think one of the beautiful things was that you were forced to confront or have some kind of recognition that this is the history of our entire country and we share that. And one of the signs, and we would the party that we went to, and for Juneteenth, it's called a jubilee. In the tradition of celebrating Juneteenth, it's a jubilee. And so we went to a jubilee, and it was organized by queer folks. And it was at Central Park and north side of Central Park here in Harlem. And one of the signs that a lot of people had with the Juneteenth flag was "Joy is coming." And that was a beautiful representation of Juneteenth. It was also a beautiful representation of the moment that we're in, when the movement for Black lives in this country. And it was with a whole bunch of pride, because it's pride. And so that to me is just all that coming together as a Black queer person who's also a feminist I was filled with joy. I think it's hard. I'll just, I'll give the example, and you can cut some of this, right? You're not going to use everything that we say. But a friend of mine, I was saying I really want to celebrate, when I was talking about Juneteenth, I really want to celebrate this really important holiday for me. And also use it as a day of rest, because was not only is it about celebration, but it's also a day where Black folks got to rest and relax. And a friend of mine said, who's also a Black queer person, said, that kind of joyful celebration is being out on the street at actions and marching. And our conversation was really about all of those things being possible at the same time. And how I often think about it is that there is joy and liberation. We have to be wanting something that beautiful at the end of all of this struggle and some pain.
Yeah, and what it made me think about is I actually just got off of a staff meeting Zoom, and I was listening to all the different reports from the departments at AVP, and listening to the ways that people have been changing how we do the work that we do in this moment where we're, all working remotely. We're dealing with a pandemic. All of these things are coming together at the same time. And what I would say is that this is not only a great opportunity and time for movement, but this is a great opportunity and time for innovation. And so I think that for me, part of what this march means is taking a step back and recognizing some of the things that have not been working for us in the past, and thinking about, how do we re-envision pride? What does it look like? We've said for years, what does it look like to center people of color? How do we bring to the front those people who have been marginalized? How do we bring to the front those issues of those people who have been marginalized? And how can we, in our imagination, create something that starts off at a playing field where everybody feels like they can come together safely, bringing their full selves and honoring the history of our movement and moving us forward into the future. And so I think that this is a great moment for that. I think that this march is an opportunity for people to see what that looks like. And we have a lot more visioning that we have to do, right? We still have to, even as we're working to defund the police department, we still have to envision what our safety looks like without police, right? This is a great opportunity to do it, recognizing that we're not completely there yet, but that is where we're trying to go. And so we will see, I think, a lot of innovation in the next couple of years. Pride doesn't have to look the same, and our movement doesn't have to look the same. So this is a great opportunity for that.
And I think, just, I know we're almost out of time, and I know I do have to get back to it, but I wanted to share a couple of things. One, a friend of mine shared something on social media, that a quote, and I didn't bother to check and see that many details about it, but it did capture a sentiment that I think is there within our broader queer community, and particularly among some of our white gay folks, which is, June is Pride Month. What is this conversation about, Juneteenth and Black Pride, when it should really just be about LGBTQ pride? And that's something I do think that we really need to see folks who are allies across movements, across identities, across communities, but particularly for white allies, gay allies, to be stepping forward and talking to their counterparts. That this is such an opportunity for us to be working toward a common vision of a society where systemic change or systemic oppression can be eliminated. That's the opportunity that we have. This is what we're seeing, and what Bev and I are talking about, being excited about, is the opportunity to re-envision and not divide. And so that's one thing I see for this kind of, for Reclaim Pride. There's an opportunity there. And then I also just want to kind of end with, this afternoon, the Ms. Foundation has its staff meeting. And we have one staff meeting a month that's only an hour long, and can sometimes be a celebration. And today it's Pride Bingo, which is a tradition at the foundation. So it's not a brand new thing. And we play bingo, we win some prizes, and people learn a lot about LGBTQI history that they might not have known about. And so I just also want to recognize that while we're looking at a moment where there's such great opportunity and room for newness, there are also traditions and there are also allies, and not everybody is just joining us. And so I want to honor and recognize that.